Okay, I'm back. Hopefully, dogs are gonna be quiet. So he's exploring these ideas of this social element with his art. So he's still creating paintings and sculptures and things like that. Aside from these big murals that he's creating in the subway. But during this time, he finds that he's often interacting with New Yorkers. He's not doing this like hidden or undercover or anything. I mean, people are passing by and riding the subway as he's working. So he finds it an opportunity to really like interact with other people in the subway, the New Yorkers. They often stop and watch him draw and talk to him and inspire him, and also he's able to explain what he's doing and explain his ideas behind this like sort of art for everybody. So during that time period where he's doing these drawings, from about 1980 to 1989 are really the big years for Keith Haring's commercial success. He receives like international recognition. So he's in the subway drawing with chalk, but he's also at the same time receiving this really like renowned praise all around the world for his work. He's exhibiting in places like New York with his paintings and drawings, sculptures and things like that he does in installation work. So like in New York, Germany, Brazil, he's creating artwork for billboards that are being that are in Times Square in New York. He's doing a lot of commercial work, which is one thing he kind of had not wanted to do. He had moved away from doing graphic design, but in this commercial work that he's doing, it's more like his artwork that he's already created is being featured on products. So he starts, his artwork is featured on watches for the company Swatch. He is designing sets and backdrops for theater, local theater, and for like stores and clubs and things like that. And he's just doing a lot of having his art featured on major advertising. In 1986, he has this idea that he's going to open a store, and the store is called the Pop Shop. It's in Soho in New York. And the idea of the store is, again, just an extension of that idea of bringing art to the general public, of making art accessible. And so this store has his artwork, but it's featured on just totally accessible things. He has it on posters, he has it on t-shirts, he has it on toys and buttons and magnets and things like that anybody really pretty much can have access to. So it's not like having to spend $1 million on a one-of-a-kind piece of art. And this is one thing that Haring does pretty extensively in his over his career, is that he produces prints and he produces posters and he produces silk screens. He produces things that are much more accessible to the average person than, say, a one-of-a-kind piece of artwork that might cost millions of dollars. And he gets a lot of flack for it. So, he's doing this thing that he thinks is really like great. Like he's making his art available for people, and he's getting a lot of flack from the art community because a lot of people don't like this idea. They want art to be this one-off, one-of-a-kind thing that does cost millions of dollars, that is like very elite and only certain people have it, or it's only in a museum and you have to go make an effort to go and participate with it. And even even like some of the other artists that were very much in pop culture are not really doing the accessibility on the level that Keith Haring is doing it. They might produce prints or they might produce some silk screens of their work, but they're not doing it on this accessibility level. Like the inside of his shop was completely covered with Keith Haring's artwork. Keith Haring was at his shop working, so it was a much different level of accessibility. And it was just really like an extension of his art and that idea of reaching out to the public. With that idea of reaching out to the public, Haring sees that there are ways in which, now that he's reached this commercial level of success, that he can really contribute and use his art to make some social messages, to also help some organizations. And so for his entire career, he remains really committed to creating works for the public and and these works having social messages. He creates over 50 pieces of art that are for charities around the world, big installation pieces for orphanages, hospitals, daycare centers, other charities. His artwork, it appears on a lot of like benefit albums, and different things like that, where he's donated his art to help sell something to raise money for charities. He also holds free workshops. He's out there in the public, not just, making this statement, but actually doing what he says he's trying to have happen. So he's out giving workshops on his art to schools, museums, literacy programs, public health campaigns. He's really, he thinks there are these important social messages that he wants to use his art to convey, and use his power as a well-known artist to support. (1988 to 1990). So Keith Haring, while very prolific in his creation of art, and one of the more prolific artists of our generation, actually had a very short amount of time that he worked. That's due to the fact that in 1988, Keith Haring was diagnosed with AIDS. But he didn't really let that diagnosis stop him. It sort of propelled him to really continue work and continue these ideas of pushing these social messages that he had. And so he immediately sets forth creating the Keith Haring Foundation. And the goal of this foundation is to provide funding and Haring images and artwork to AIDS foundations and children's programs, and to expand the audience for his work, because he feels like his work does have an important social message, and especially in the later years, it very much reflects the AIDS crisis that is happening in America. And so he wants to make sure that, if he's not here anymore, that his work can continue to be accessible for everybody, and accessible for these organizations to be able to use it. So during the last years of his life, he works tirelessly as an advocate for AIDS, and he speaks very openly about his own illness, and he advocates extensively for awareness and funds for this disease. He dies of complications from this disease in February of 1990, but like I said, we still have all of this amazing art and these amazing messages and social constructs that Haring was trying to create as his legacy. So, in this short amount of time that he works, and in his short life, he is featured in like over 100 solo and group exhibits around the world. He's the subject of hundreds of articles. It's really easy to find information about Haring. There's a Keith Haring website that has a ton of information about him, and there's just so many different articles and interviews with Haring in his life. He works, with a lot of other artists, such as Madonna, Andy Warhol, Grace Jones, Timothy Leary, Yoko Ono, William Burroughs. So his work with them is another extension of popular culture that is easily recognizable today. In his work, over the course of his entire span of his career, his work really focuses on these themes that are universal to everyone. It's something, and that's another element of making them accessible to everybody and really being art for the public. And so the themes that he continuously kind of goes back to and represents in his art are the ideas of love, war, birth, and death. So these are things that basically everybody is exposed to and everybody feels some connection to and can understand. And is universal as far as It doesn't matter where you live or what your language is, or if you're rich or you're poor, or what your race is, or your demographic, or anything. These are all universal themes that we can all understand. And his images are so bold and so easy to understand and recognize these themes, and that they're very appealing to people of all different kinds of backgrounds, and continue to be so today. So today, like I said, you can find Keith Haring artwork just about anywhere if you're looking for it. It's on advertising, it's on t-shirts, album covers, exhibitions all in over the world, museums everywhere. He's really one of the most recognizable artists of the 20th century. Once you know Keith Haring, you pretty much instantly recognize Keith Haring's artwork if you see it. So I am going to link you guys to a set of Keith Haring images that are in my Google Drive that you can look at, and lots of different images, some slides that you'll see. It's in a slideshow presentation, so you'll go through and you can see a bunch of different images of Haring's artwork, and on some of the different things that he worked on, sculptures. He painted on cars, he painted on skateboards, he painted big murals. And then after those slides, you will see that there are quite a few slides that show you products that Keith Haring's artwork appears on, and those are just a small sampling of the things that Keith Haring's artwork has been turned into over the years. Literally everything you can think of, pretty much. So I'm going to let you guys look at those images, and then there's also going to be a link to a PDF. You don't have to print this out, but this is going to be a step-by-step on how to create your piece of art. So it's going to be this worksheet right here that I have created for you, but it's going to be a step-by-step on how do you create a Keith Haring figure. And then what I'm going to ask you to do is and the instructions for this are on that sheet of paper, is to create your own piece of artwork based on Keith Haring. And so you're going to learn to create the Keith Haring traditional figure that is very recognizable. I know everybody has different sizes of paper. If you only have access to a sheet of copy paper like this, that is totally fine. If you have bigger paper, by all means, please do a nice big piece of artwork. But I would like for you to fill your paper with Keith Haring figures in all different poses and gestures. So if you're in my Tuesday class, this kind of is an extension of what we were working on last with figure drawings. And I have some suggestions in here for where you can get ideas for the different poses and gestures that you're going to draw on the worksheet. Keith Haring artwork is one of the key things that you will see as you look through Keith Haring artwork is the use of bold line. He uses bold black line to outline his figures. And also the use of very, very intense bright colors. So you never see dull colors in Keith Haring's artwork. Generally, a lot of primary and secondary colors are used. So I would like for you to focus on those two elements in your artwork. And like I said, you can use any supplies that you have at home. If you have markers, they work great for doing Keith Haring really bold outlines. But if you don't, you can use crayons, or if you have watercolors or something like that that you would like to use instead, you can try to use those as well. So basically whatever you have access to. And if you, for whatever reason, do not have access to anything to make color with, just do the sketch. That will be totally sufficient. But do try, if you have the colored pencils, you can use any of that stuff to color it in. The second part will be a little pamphlet that just has some information for you to fill in about Keith Haring. If you don't have access to a printer and you can't print that out to do, that's okay. Just shoot me an email or something. Let me know that you can't complete that, and it's not anything to worry about. But if you are able to, please do so. Otherwise, I will get you a paper copy when we hopefully meet in person again, and you can do it then. So again, this class, this video, and the work, I'm not expecting to do in one class period. This is taking the place of 2 class periods, just like we typically do with art, where we have our lesson and then we work on our project for the next for the rest of the class and for the next class period. So if you have any questions, you can make a comment, or you can send me an email, or have your parents send me an email, and I promise I will get back to you about it. And that's all for now. So I hope to see you soon.